Great. Great. Good evening. Hello to everyone. My name is Yanis Vlasis. I'm the Deputy Chair of the LGBTQ plus campaign committee of the Student Union of University of Kingston. I am a social work student, and today we have three guests and we are going to discuss about religion. Three guests from different cultural and religious background, and the point of this conversation is basically to celebrate spirituality and celebrate and the fact that we can be spiritual and we can identify in the LGBTQI plus community. So let me go through in alphabetical order and I can introduce our guest today, which is, we have Aman Singh, who is British Indian descent man, and he's presenting Sarbat, which is a volunteering group addressing LGBTQ plus issues for the Singh community. Hello, good morning. Good evening. I also have Gerard Swan, who is the chair to Quest, the leading LGBTQA plus Catholic community charity organization in the UK. Hello, Gerard. I think you're mute.
Good. Hi. Sorry about that.
And I have Mayank Joshi, who is a Hindu and founder of GENE, who is the leading LGBTQ plus Indian and South Asian social and support network in Britain.
Yes, hello, Yanis.
Hello. Thank you very much all for coming today. So the reason we basically decided, the group decided to do this workshop today is that we all have experience growing up, and basically when we start understanding our identity and we start like questioning who we are and how we would like to identify sexually, but also gender-wise ourselves, we do come in a sense that is the religion that we grow up with, that we culturally defined with, be accepted on us? And from my personal experience, growing up in a Greek Christian Orthodox family who weren't very conservative, but we used to go to Sunday church, I used to go to Sunday school, and we grow up with this kind of cultural belief. I start feeling myself after the age of 16 that probably God doesn't love me, probably I have disappointed God, and since I basically identify myself as a gay man, I felt that spiritually I have left a little bit the Christian religion. Also, we're living in Britain, which is a very multicultural and multi-religious community, and there's been quite loads of diversity, but there's there's a loads of prejudice from both sides of, okay, if you're the one, you cannot be the other. So on the first part of this workshop, I would like to give the space to our guests today and tell us a little bit about maybe their own experiences, maybe discuss a little bit about like the work they do, the charity they do, so we can start having a conversation going. So should I start with Aman? Hello, Aman.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Yanis. Thank you for inviting me here, first of all.
and to Kingston University as well. So my name is Aman. I'm a 26-year-old man. I live in the UK, and I identify as a gay man. I also identify as a Sikh, a follower of the Sikh religion. And that was quite hard for me to reconcile both of those two identities into a single one. Although I'm happy to say I can do that now, and I feel comfortable doing so. I'd like to start by saying that in Sikhism, there isn't any strong or very well-defined stance on homosexuality or other kind of queer identities. But Sikhism does believe very strongly in equality for all and fighting against the oppressed. And so in my interpretation of that, and the group that I represent, Sarbat, we also all agree that Sikhism is something that should accept and embrace homosexuality. So I wanted to share an experience about how being a Sikh man and wearing a turban has affected me and kind of grasping my identity of myself. So when I was growing up, I wore a turban, and I started to I started to want to date or to meet other people and realize that I was gay. And I found it very difficult to try and marry those two together, knowing that, well, feeling that on one hand, I'm a turban wearing Sikh man and I'm not allowed to be gay, or this thing doesn't happen in our religion or our culture, while also wanting to be a man in the LGBT community and to be accepted like one as well. And so throughout my adult years, I really struggled with trying to kind of make a connection with somebody who will accept both sides of my identity, as it were. One of the biggest barriers I found in dating specifically was that by wearing a turban, I'm very visibly and obviously wearing my religion out in front of me. And I had been told in the past that I'm too visibly ethnic or too visibly religious, and that would make me undateable, or it wouldn't make somebody feel happy to approach me in that kind of setting. And so it really made me question whether it's possible to have this identity and also try and live the lifestyle that I want to live as a gay man. At that point, I did kind of question whether I wanted to wear a turban and what the turban what it really represents for me. And I think I really wish I had found the group Sarbat earlier, or have an opportunity to listen to discussions like we're having today, to realize that we don't have to separate those two parts of our identity. And actually being a Sikh and being a proud Sikh, wearing a turban is a very important part of my identity, as well as being a gay man. So yeah, I think that was kind of my experience of dating. The other thing that I think was very important is to kind of recognize that in Sikh religion, being homosexual is not really spoken about, but is part of being equal and feeling like part of your community, which is very important to Sikhism. However, it's very easy to kind of combine the beliefs of the religion of Sikhism and the culture of Punjab and northern India, or even Indian culture in general, as being against homosexuality. And for me, it took me a long time to try and separate those, not only in my conscious mind, but also I think in my subtle and unconscious mind too. So I made a very good friend who is also a Sikh woman. We were very, very, very good friends for about 4 years, and we would talk about everything except that I was gay. And I found it very difficult to open up to her about that part of me, because I think deep down, there were these worries and fears in me about how would she react, being on one hand my friend, but also being a member of the Sikh religion and in the culture of Punjab and northern India. And so I think in a way, being part of these two identities and this intersectionality actually made it quite difficult to open up to my best friend about a very important part of my life. Eventually, I did tell her about it, and I'm glad to say that she actually knew it all along and wasn't fazed by it at all. And since we've become even closer and best friends, and now there's everything, we talk about everything. There's no barriers to our relationship. So I think those are some of the points I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for expressing so basically give us a little bit of your personal experience. It's always really nice to hear people's personal stories. And I do believe that we all can relate to, no matter the religion we have. I think from what you discuss, I really find it very interesting where you said about you wearing my religion by your turban, and it must be quite more challenging for someone who has to basically explain himself maybe twice than someone like me. Well, even if I'm religious or not, nobody would be able to say. Thank you very much for discussing that with me. And then let's just go to Gerard, who is the chair of Quest, the Catholic organization. Hello, Gerard.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come and share something of my experience this evening with you all. So, yeah, I'm Gerard. I'm the current chair to Quest, which is a volunteer-led charity, which has been around since about 1973. And we have our origins in the experience of a gay man who approached his local minister, a priest in this case in the Roman Catholic Church, to talk to the priest about his gayness, his homosexuality, and what that meant in terms of also being a person of faith. And his experience wasn't a good one, as was quite typical, particularly in those days. Still can be like that for folk now, little bit less so. We're seeing lots of positive signs in terms of what's offered within our church buildings from our ministers these days. There's significant shift in that landscape, but his experience then wasn't a great one, and he moved from Wales to London. And when he got there, he put an ad in the I think it was the Gay News in those days, saying, "I'm gay, I'm Catholic. Is there anyone else out there who's gay and Catholic who wants to explore what that means and how we can reconcile those two things together?" And I think he got about 19 responses, and from those, a group of 9 people met. And the organization has really evolved from there. So originally a small network that was based in London, but as people, friends of friends of friends around the UK became aware of the conversations that were going on and the support that was available, then the organization grew from there. So we're now a kind of countrywide network. We have a membership of about 180, and those are grouped into, we have 5 regional groups. We used to be more of a city-based organization, had a lot of groups. We now only have 5 regional groups, but within our regional groups, we cater for both members of Quest and people who are looking to reconcile their sexuality and their identity with, for us, their Catholic faith, their Christianity, and looking for fellowship, for support to do that. And within our regional groups, we run program. The groups all kind of run kind of independently, and organize ranges of activities from spiritually focused retreats, gatherings to consider specific issues or specific aspects of faith, through to social activities, and all sorts of day walks, going for a walk, meeting to go to a pub. So we have a broad range of activities. Inevitably, though, my experience is that if we, for example, go on a day walk, because we are a group of people who have come together because of our faith and our sexuality and identity, then we're looking for a kind of fellowship and an opportunity to talk to other people and to explore what that looks like, what that means in our daily life, what are the challenges that we face, what are the things that we're learning, what are the things that we're discovering. So even our social activity does have that background, I would perhaps describe it as spiritual context to it. My own experience, and before I go on to that, nationally, I guess we are a kind of advocacy organization. So we are promoting that integration of faith with sexuality and identity. We engage with our own, for us, it's the Catholic Church hierarchy, where there are opportunities to do that. We have a website which makes information available to people, support information available to people. We run an annual conference that's open to both our membership and to anyone else who wants to come along at a national level. And we are a charity, so we have a group of trustees who lead that activity and, if you like, our strategy as we move forward in time and respond to the changes in the landscape as they take place. In terms of my own experience, I'm a bit older, I'm retired, and I look back, and I guess my first recollection of being gay, I identify as a gay man, was about the age of 4. But at the age of 4, I really didn't know what I knew. I didn't have the language. And within the town that I grew up, a small parochial Scottish town, really that town didn't have an experience of what it meant to be gay. I wouldn't say it was a homophobic town. There was just nothing there for me to go, oh, that's me, I'm like that. And it was like that for a very, very long time. So although I knew I was gay from that very, very early age, I wasn't able to give language to that and bring understanding to that until I was really in my mid-20s. I began my coming out journey at 19, when I told someone that I thought maybe 5% of me was a little bit gay. Hey, 100%. Big tattoo on my forehead saying gay, to anyone who's got eyes to see. So the journey was a slow one, but I was always heavily involved in my local parish church growing up, and later when I was a teacher for 20 years, taught in a Catholic school for the first 4 of my teaching, 4 years of my teaching career, and was very much a model Catholic, heavily involved in my parish, ran the music group, organized all sorts of church activities, taught in a Catholic school, and was, as I say, was very much a model Catholic. But I think as I became increasingly aware of my sexuality and understood it and then was exploring, well, what does that mean for me? I'm not going to be straight married. I'm not going to have a straight family. All of the things that were part of the future that had been the picture of my future that had been painted for me for many, many years, deconstructing that and working out who I was took some time. And at some point, I guess in my very, very late 20s, early 30s, there came a crisis for me in terms of my involvement with my parish church. And I remember walking out one day, and it wasn't for a number of years that I kind of stayed away from the church. I never lost what I would call my spirituality, my sense of, I'll use the word God, but an expression of that within the Catholic Church just wasn't possible. And after a number of years, I worked in London over one school holiday where people just assumed I was gay, and I had this sense of liberation in just being myself for the first time without looking over my shoulder all the time. And when I came home after the time working in London, I decided that I needed to, I grew up coming out to straight people, kind of in my later 20s. And I decided I needed an LGBT plus peer group. And I also decided that I needed to explore my sexuality and my faith in the same space again, and to work out whether or not there was any opportunity to, if you like, rejoin the Catholic Church. And it was that point that I joined Quest. And I have to say, Quest has been my kind of tentative link to the Catholic Church since. The thread is sometimes still very, very thin, even though the landscape is slowly becoming more positive. And I'm sure many of you will have heard of the many good things that our current hierarchical leader, Pope Francis, has said. And he's certainly been instrumental in reshaping both the broader Catholic landscape and specifically in relation to the LGBT plus community. So that's a bit about me. I'll kind of sign off there and hand over to someone else.
Thank you very, very much from what you share with us. I think you talk about advocacy, and I do believe that advocacy, religious advocacy, it's very, very necessary, because being in a university with a quite diverse, big diverse students, big percent of the students are very diverse, coming from diverse communities and religions. And I see in our society as well, I could just see that there's children that they come, teenagers that they come from different kinds of religions, students, new students, and they try to come together with other peers from the community, and it's a kind of a struggle to feel like, you know, where am I standing there, and are these people, I want to make friends who identify the same like me, but would be able for me to share them what my religion is, what my cultural background is, and I might get judgment. And I think at least the way it comes across usually in media and in films is that a religion is something like, oh my God, it's a no thing. It's a very, very gray area. And we have to clear that out, because then we cannot expect, we shouldn't expect tolerance from others if we don't tolerate people who would like to identify, they want to identify who they want, because it's part of them. So we'll go back to that, and I would ask your opinions more about this. But let's just bring on the conversation Joshi as well. He can tell us a little bit more about his personal journey.
Yes, thank you very much, Yanis, and thank you for the invitation. So my name is Mike Joshi, and I am the founder of the GIN, which is the Gained Network. and which is started as Gay Indian Network. Now we are the LGBTQIA Indian network in Britain with about 1,500 members. And in GIN, we have people reflecting sort of the religious diversity and faith of India and the Indian subcontinent. I was raised up in a Hindu family. My mother was particularly religious. I mean, she was a vegetarian. I don't think she actually ate out, outside, in a restaurant. She may have ice cream in a restaurant with us, but I don't think she actually ate any cooked food in a restaurant ever. That's how religious she was. She was very careful about how the food was prepared, who prepared it, and where she could eat. We celebrated all the main Hindu festivals in the house, Diwali, Holi, Raksha Bandhan, and so on. And then I began to have my sexual awakening more at the age of sort of 11 and 12, when I remember I was actually on a holiday in India. I suddenly fancied a guy, and I thought, oh, I'm having these strange feelings about this. And so in being a Hindu, sex and sexuality are sort of, they're very much a side dish to your core identity. So you have your core identity, and then you have sort of the surface layers, and sex and sexuality are surface layer. So in one sense, and there is a school of Hinduism which celebrates simply having sex. You're born into a human body, you have the 5 senses, you have the right to enjoy the best food, smell the best smells, listen to the most beautiful music, have the most physical, beautiful experiences, because you are born into a human body, which is a privilege in itself. So, and also Hinduism being at its core a religion of the path, of the paths. So in its purest form, the individual defines their path, and then they follow it. And that is what the individual should be doing in this life. Having said that, then society comes along. So first, like the religious sense, there wasn't, I don't think there was any pressure of anybody saying, look, you are doing something fundamentally wrong by having sex with a man. There wasn't a concept of you will suffer, or you may go to hell, or so on, by doing this. And that wasn't there. But the pressure was, of course, and of course, the transgender people in India have a position that ancient India has created for them. So, very much in sort of the old days, it was man, woman, and the third gender, the hijras, the transgender, and a space has been created for them by society, and have their own organizations. So on. There are religious sections, and in both in mythology and the religious texts, about the transgenders. There are transgender heroes in the Indian texts. But when it comes to actually having sex, then it's a physical act which raises eyebrows. So I remember when I realized I was gay, the issue for me was really the burden of family expectations. Get married, have children. So and being an immigrant in Britain, of the second generation immigrant, my parents had the usual immigrant experience, a tough life, adapting to Britain, holding on to their faith and their religion and their ways, and being faced with this discrimination, and still managed to achieve something and raise their children. So there was a lot of pressure of not wanting to let the family down. And to an extent, I also felt a little bit isolated, because I didn't have many cousins, and I had one sibling, and so again, I felt that if I suddenly tell people I'm gay, or tell my family I'm gay, and I suddenly tell them I'm not getting married, or I'm not going to have children, this would be devastating for them. It would be very hard for them. They don't have the support structure that organizations like GIN and Serbat and are trying to create now, and Iman and Hidayat. So so the pressure wasn't so much on the religious side, but it was from the social side, very much so. I did finally tell my parents in my late 30s, late 20s, and my father said, it was very emotional for me, and I was crying, and I was saying to him, look, you know, I don't want to see any more women now that you're trying to introduce me to, because I'm a gay man. My mother said to me, she didn't understand what gay was, but she thought I meant I'm a transgender man. So she said, but you don't look transgender. I know a man who is very much who looks like a woman, you know, she says to me. And even he got married. So why can't you? And I said, no, you know, I'm not transgender, but you know, that's not the idea. I do want to live my life as a gay man. And my father responded by saying, I'm so glad you've told us. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you finally come out. I did think about this. I did think you were, but I'm so glad you told us. Because, you know, we can find a doctor, we can find a psychiatrist. My father was raised up in the sort of Freudian, I guess, thoughts that psychiatry could maybe fix all these things from the 50s and 60s. So he wanted me to maybe go and see a therapist to stop me or cure me from being a homosexual. And then when I pushed back against that, a couple more years went by. And then I noticed cousins of mine in India were calling me saying, oh, I hear you're quite a big believer in religion and philosophy, and you're become a very Hindu person. And I thought, well, you know, I'm a Hindu, I believe in the philosophy, I do go to the temple, but I'm not particularly that religious. But apparently my father had been telling everybody that I want to become a sadhu. I don't want to get married because I'm such a deeply religious person that I want to become a sadhu. And I thought, how interesting. He's looking for a path for me to follow, a way out for me, which is acceptable to society, to his circle, and the family. So I could say, look, I am a sadhu. This is why I don't really, you know, I'm not getting married. But again, for me, that was not being authentic. I wanted to, you know, I had a partner at the time and I wanted to introduce the partner to everyone, and I wanted everybody to recognize us as a couple. So, that's one of the reasons why many years later, I mean, at that time, there was an organization called Shakti that supported LGBTQ people of South Asian origin. And then you have Serbat starting, you have Hidayat, Iman as well. And Jin started about 3.5 years ago, because I think these conversations need to be had. And I think, you know, people should not have to walk away from their faith and things they fundamentally value and believe in simply because of their sexuality. And in fact, when they do that, I think there are cases when actually, thus, you know, it can cause loneliness, depression, and sometimes some of the issues in life that we all face become a little bit harder to deal with, because faith can give us strength as well. Okay? I think, yes, that's it. That's what I wanted to say.
Very beautiful words, and you spoke about being authentic, and I think that's the problem when we are discussing religion. And you did discuss about pressure, which is twice as much the pressure for someone who tried to understand his sexual identity, and you do have the pressure from the family. And if it's not your and if the family, you have a lovely family, that's great, but maybe it's the pressure, the social pressure, or is also the pressure of religion. So talking about pressure, I would like your opinion, guys, about how about family as religious person, because for me it was just kind of an idea the first few years. Like when I came out, I thought, okay, I would probably not be able to have a family of the way the family I thought it would be at that time. Obviously the times have changed since then, but still there is loads of people who do like recognize that I would not be able to have a family, a partner, which means a partner, which means children. So let's talk about family. What do you think about? Yes, Gerald, please.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would address first of all is to say that I think the notion of family, there's a little bit of mythology around what family actually is. And I think all cultures perhaps promote family as being the man, the woman, hundreds of children, 2 children, 3 children, whatever the kind of cultural imperative is. And ideally that family will live in a beautiful house. And the more beautiful, the better. And, you know, they will, in some cultures, only one of the partners will work. And they will be really successful. And the more successful they are, the more beautiful the family is. And I think there's a lot of narrative, a lot of story, and in many cultures, where my own culture is a Scottish culture, there's a narrative about what a good family is and what the positions within the family mean. And yet I think when we look at the reality of family life and we dig under the surface of the veneer, we find that there aren't many who conform to the notion of these lovely families. So within my own family, there are 4 children. There were 5. One of my siblings died. But we tick many of the boxes for being what some might describe as a dysfunctional family, or a family with children who failed. So, you know, there's me, the gay son, and so on and so on and so on. And I think with most families, when you dig below the surface, then you find those those situations that say, hey, this isn't true. This notion of, you know, we don't have sex till we get married. And then you discover that your granny was pregnant with your mum when she got married a very long time ago. And yet granny was so adamant about this controlled sexuality and that people could control themselves. So you know, when we start to look at the truth of the narratives of family, we find that they're not that true. So then I think when what happens perhaps with LGBT plus families, perhaps less so in the UK now, is that our notion of family, our honesty about the families we have, no matter how much 2 men try, that it's not going to happen without help. And the same with 2 women, it's not happening without help. So if we have children, there is a declaration there that we have either adopted or that we have sought help. We don't see those declarations within the veneer of the straight family. Whereas I think our relationships and our families are more visually honest. So
I do think, though, that quite loads of gay couples and lesbian couples, they just feel that they just, like, obviously, yeah, they just losing something, they just missing something. Like, for example, I would believe that someone who is probably religious, he would like to be able to marry in a church, for example. Maybe not. And maybe if he doesn't want to get married in a church, maybe he would not feel that he is equal with straight people. Eamon wanted to add on this.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to actually reflect on something that Joshi said earlier as well, in that for me, with family came a lot of expectation on what the rest of my life should look like, and I would be expected to marry a woman and have children and live this, exactly as Gerard said, the straight family life. But actually, I found that the thought of that was actually even more oppressive than going along with the religion. But what I actually really like to reflect on is that in Sikhism, all men are given the surname Singh and all women are given the surname Kaur, with the idea that we are all equal on the same level, and we call each other brothers and sisters of the same religion. So on one hand, I felt like my family's expectations of what should happen when you're a Sikh man, were actually completely different to the family that I feel like I had by being part of the Sikh religion and having my brothers and sisters around me there. And then also, I think I think family is what you choose to make it in some ways. I see family as the people who are there for you, for their never-ending support. And for some LGBT community, that may not be their biological family. They may not have the support throughout their lives that other people do have. But we kind of find our own family as well. And in Sabab, the LGBT Sikh organization that I work in, we also consider each other our family as well, because we have this mutual understanding of what it feels like to be exactly in the position that we are all in. So yeah, those are my thoughts on family.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And just to add to our guests, so please, if you have any questions, just put them on the chat box and we can discuss them. Since we're talking about a little bit on religion and probably because I would like to get a little bit your perspective of wrong perceptions that LGBTQ plus community has about religion. And I'm talking mostly if you just suggest something from probably the textbooks, because we get in this idea of just like, oh my God, I'm just like, having sex with a man. Oh, that's against the textbooks, against I'm a sinner. So can we please clarify a little bit these kind of things, just to get a little bit more clarity to what actually is true? Joshi, please.
Yeah, so I hadn't worked out how to raise my hand on my new tablet, so I put my hand up. It's interesting being a Hindu, because the LGBT community, whether you're in a Bai Soho, you're sitting in a community center somewhere, they know so little about Hinduism.
Exactly.
So little. They sort of think of maybe a few idols here and there. And I think I certainly do get tired sometimes explaining to my sort of non-aware friends about Hinduism. And I think, I mean, for example, it affects so many different things, like the food you eat, the times you may go to the temple or place of worship, and when you go and why you go. Also, the whole karmic theory of living and then dying, and reincarnation. Reincarnation is a huge topic in Hinduism. I mean, and in Buddhism, it's massive. And that's something that's really talked about within Hindu or maybe Buddhist circles. So I think it is hard. My partner's Italian. He was raised up as Catholic, and it's been really interesting sort of learning off each other. And I think I do wish that more people would sort of maybe have a think about the fact that a religion that may not be as simply in the sort of the Western Abrahamic Islamic way of looking at religion. You know, there are people who will worship mountains and trees and other things that may be considered holy, and there are so many different paths that people may follow.
So since we're talking about religion, have you ever faced discrimination from any of your from your peers, and don't basically told you, oh, you know, you are not a good Christian, or you are not a good, you don't follow the right orders of Sikhism, and you just felt that, okay, hold on, maybe you second guess it yourself? Is that ever happened to you? Someone that you didn't have the experience? Oh, please, Ayman. Aman. Sorry, I call you Ayman. Sorry.
That's okay. Yes, so I think for me personally, I was quite worried to even kind of open myself out to the opportunity for discrimination, because I already felt in myself discriminated against, and possibly like from myself and my own internalized homophobia, but also because of the culture that is so intertwined with religion for what I was growing up. What I actually found was that the discrimination that I perceived there to be was actually not as pervasive as I thought it was. And like with my story earlier about my Sikh friend of 4 years, it turns out I wasn't discriminated against by her. In fact, I was discriminating against myself by not telling her sooner. And also just on the mention of discrimination, in the Sikh and the laws in India, we're trying to equalize gay marriage, and it's been a long and arduous struggle. And sadly, at the moment, the marriage equality notion that had been put forward had been unanswered. It had gone on too long to give a full answer for, which has been accepted by Sikh marriage equality as a no. So in that way, there is still discrimination happening in Sikhism, and it's coming from the higher kind of authorities, which is why it's really important to kind of band together and share these experiences too. We do live in, I'm very lucky to live in the UK, where it is quite a liberal place and people are not discriminated against in some ways, but it's still happening.
And of course, talking about discrimination, though, we have to reflect ourselves, and we have to reflect as a community. And I'm going to what Josie said before. I don't want anymore to explain myself. Sorry, Gerard wants you to add something on what we were discussing.
Yeah, it was just to add to what Aman has said. I kind of fully agree. I think there's this complex interplay as well of all sorts of different factors. So if we take whatever the holy book is of some faiths as an example, people have an understanding of what those books say based on what they've been told. And what they've been told may be accurate, but it could be inaccurate. So as an example, with the Christian Bible, many of the references within the English translations of the English Bible have, in relation to homosexuality, there aren't that many texts. There are far more texts saying quite a lot about heterosexuality and how heterosexuals should behave. but the texts that are used to discriminate, if you like, within the faith setting against homosexuals, what we're learning now as academics are really digging deep into these texts is that texts have been mistranslated. And what we understand in terms of loving, for example, loving same-sex relationships are not, there is no representation in any of the holy texts, in any valid translation. And that where there is translation, the words that have been used are often used for political or cultural gain. And so there's something about those, what people understand about the holy texts. There's also what people understand within their own cultures. And very often cultures are shaped by the need to have someone to discriminate against, someone to scapegoat. Within the LGBT plus community at the moment, we're seeing increased rates of homophobia, biphobia, but in particular transphobia. And the trans community are particularly under attack at the moment. And both in mainstream British culture, there was something came out just the other week about a government department that is in effect targeting trans people, but also dividing the trans community from the, or attempts at dividing the trans community from the LGBT plus community, so dividing and ruling. So there are aspects of that within culture. And so I think how we experience discrimination within our faith settings is often shaped by an experience, shaped by the experiences that people have and the understandings that they develop that are very often misunderstandings. One of the things that we see in many, certainly in my own experiences, we see people's hearts changing when people get to know LGBT plus people, when we become just ordinary, boring, everyday neighbors and friends, and the people that we chat to within our faith setting, whether that's a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or another holy building.
So how would be able to change that? Because having your personal bias, your cultural bias, it's really, really hard. I mean, I see that especially at social work, when you have to change people traumatic experience, when you have to change people perception and see their own selves and see that they've been discriminated, how you can change that narrative in the community, but also you change the narrative about the perception of religion within LGBTQ community.
I don't mind coming in again to kick that off. I think, and I would, the first thing that I would say is we all have to keep ourselves safe. So what I'm about to say is kind of in the context of I can't just out myself. I have to out myself in safe spaces. I can't out myself to a community that I depend on that's going to reject me. So to be clear, but I think where we are able to live our truths openly, to share our stories, then that's when we see people's hearts and minds changing, and firstly their hearts, and it's the same for me. If there's, you know, I meet someone who looks in a particular way, and I kind of I belong to a lovely yoga community that I've discovered here in Leicester where I live, and there's a real quirky, beautifully strange bunch of people, some of whom look ordinary and mainstream, and some of them don't look ordinary and mainstream. But what's interesting is where I am in community with those people and sharing story, then I start to see the person and not my perception of the person based on how they look or what I know about people who are described in this way. So in the context of we have to keep ourselves safe, there is that we change hearts by sharing story. So seeking opportunities. Aman, you described your friend and sharing your story, and that leading you to a new level of truth and understanding and friendship and love, I'm sure, of each other, because there's less in the way now.
That's great, even though I do feel there's loads of people that they, as Josie said, we are tired to explain ourselves, we are tired to present ourselves and telling us who we are and who we that. And I think especially now with the discussion about pronouns, and someone very simple said, if you can update an app in your phone every second 3 weeks, you can update your vocabulary by learning some new pronouns. So so Josie, would you like to add something on that?
Yes, really. I just want to follow on from what Gerald was saying, and I think mentioning safety, and this is really important. I mean, I know many religious families, and Hindus, other religions in Britain really struggle having LGBTQ children. They do, and I think every individual LGBTQ person has to carefully understand the environment they're in, understand their families, understand their relatives and the community. Maybe pick one ally at a time. It could be your sister. It could, and then take it from there. And also there are organizations like, I do want to mention Naz and Matt. Naz and Matt are a fantastic organization, and they deal specifically with helping LGBTQ children in very religious families. But simply coming out isn't the answer. Simply saying, look, in many cases, that can be unsafe as well. In terms of also as a gay man, I had to accept that my family may only accept things to a limit, and I had to sort of get to understand where their limits were. And yes, I did modify my behavior to fit into those limits. I may not take my partner on a trip in India to particular places sometimes, but that's what we negotiated, and sometimes there are these negotiations. That doesn't mean we don't go to India, but it just means there's some context within India that I may not take my partner to. And I think it's about those compromises, it's about negotiating. And ultimately, finally, I would say, is sometimes I have to accept that some of my relatives simply will not accept me because I'm a gay man. And it's not my fault, and I'm not going to be able to change them. And many of them are because they're sort of, religious people or very traditional people or whatever, and their upbringing. But I have to accept that in myself, that some of my family members may not accept me because I'm a gay man. And that's okay. We also have organizations and our families that we create in our own image, that we can connect to, whether it's through GIN or whether it's through other organizations, where we can feel safe, comfortable, authentic, where we can be ourselves.
So what I understand is that there's still a long way to go, and I think our straight allies, they need to understand that things like LGBTQ plus History Month, Pride, it's very, very important because it brings an opportunity for those issues to come forward and discuss. I would really like to thank you guys. I would like to close. Thank you very much. Everything we discussed today, they were eye-opening, and I hope people view this in this workshop and enjoy it as much as I enjoyed. I would like to close by asking you to, by basically mention your organization so people can find you, and or just basically talk about your social media, so how people can find you and get in touch with you. And closing with an advice. What would you advise to a young teenager who is try to find who he is, try to question his sexuality? So who would like to start? Gerard?
As I said previously, firstly, stay safe. Be sure about who you're opening yourself up to. And I think for me, if I was giving myself advice, it would be and it's what I did, but not until I was much older, was find a community, find peers. And there are organizations around now. There are 3 organizations represented here, and there are others. So, you know, we have a website. I've put the website into chat box. We have you can contact us if you wanted to explore, or if you wanted to know which other groups are out there. If Catholicism isn't your thing, it's not always my thing, to be honest. But you know, we are part of, and I think this is the case across the LGBT plus faith groups, is that increasingly what we're seeing is people are networking and sharing. So for example, we're 18 plus. We don't cater for younger people, but there are other groups who do. There are, you know, if you're Catholic and you live in this city, there may be nothing for you, but we know of other activities or other people that you could approach where you could find fellowship. So stay safe, reach out to reputable organizations where you can, but there are opportunities out there.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Eamon?
Yeah, so I'd like to echo what Gerard said, actually, that all of these organizations and groups are connected in some way. I've met Joshi before. I've heard about lots of the organizations that have been mentioned during this meeting today. So if there is a group or some support that is required and you don't know where to find it, approaching just one of these organizations could be the stepping stone to find the people that you may need. We are ultimately all out there to help each other. It's just about finding the right people who will give you the right kind of support in the right way, I suppose. I'm just going to post into the chat the details to contact Sabath if that is something that you would like to do.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Eamon. And Joshi? Oh, you're still mute.
Yes, my lovely new tablet. I'm still getting used to it. Yes, so I represent GIN. We started as Gay Indian Network. Actually, we started as GIN and Bombay Tonic, as just a little bit of drinks in Soho, you know, light-hearted. I had no idea at the time when I started it that there'd be a huge demand for a group like ours, a group that will connect people, LGBTQ people of Indian heritage, the diaspora, with their friends and their allies together in the United Kingdom. So yes, we started off as GIN. but the Gay Indian Network, but we are very much today an Indian and South Asian space, social space, and support space for LGBTQI people of the Indian subcontinent and their friends and allies. Allies are really important to us as well. We have deeper conversation groups. We have book club, a film club. Food is really, really important to us, so we have a food group as well. We have a group for young people under 35, the next generation. All these groups are there so people can connect and talk to each other and share these stories. If there are Hindus or the Sikhs or Muslims or Buddhists, and they need to talk to each other about these things, that they can't talk to each other in the bars and the clubs. That's the spaces there as well. So that's Gin. Our our email is really easy, gin.lgbtqi@gmail.com, Gin Indian UK on Twitter, Gin Indian on Instagram, and the website is gayindiannetworklondon.com. Okay.
Great.
That's Gin for you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, all our three guests today. What I'm getting from the conversation is that there is a light at the end of the road. I think we all have to feel a little bit less hard with ourselves, especially when exploring those issues, because you want to be authentic, but you can be authentic only when you approaching exactly yourself on the way you want to be. I would like to thank all my guests today for coming in and give us their thoughts and some very beautiful and great insight information. And have a good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.